In 2020, we're seeing the largest amount of DDoS attacks, and unfortunately, they're just getting more and more powerful and disruptive. Danny Palmer with ZDNet here to talk to me a little bit about this. Danny, I think a good place to start, talk about DDoS attacks in general. What do they look like?
Well, DDoS attacks, or distributed denial of service attacks, are ultimately cyber attacks which flood a target with internet traffic to such an extent it takes them offline. I guess the most famous example of this in recent years was probably the Mirai botnet attack, which back in a few years ago took down vast swathes of digital services. Things like Netflix, PlayStation Network, a lot of cloud services were just taken offline because they got overwhelmed by web traffic being controlled by cyber attackers. Which, with these services going offline, it meant people couldn't use digital services, which was bad then. Obviously, it'd be much worse now if it happened, because in 2020 we're all much more digital because of events. And as this survey says by Netscout, unfortunately, these attacks are getting bigger and more intense as cyber attackers take control of more devices, be it computers, servers, Internet of Things devices, and redirect that traffic towards victims. In some cases, it is done for some sort of purpose. It has been known for attackers to direct traffic, or say they will direct traffic at a service and say, if you don't pay us, or you don't do something we want you to do, we will take you offline. In other cases, it's just done because they can, because the opportunity is there. I mean, there was a quite famous example a few years ago of a major gaming tournament, one which was set up in an arena with fans watching, tens of thousands of fans watching this online gaming tournament, was taken offline. It couldn't start because someone had directed web traffic towards the servers, which meant this tournament with millions of dollars in prize money couldn't get started until this DDoS attack had passed. Basically, it's not the most advanced attack in the world, but it does create huge problems for organizations.
And Danny, obviously, this isn't something new. We've seen these attacks before and have talked about them before, but it definitely seems like they're taking on a more disruptive form.
Yes. Previously, attacks might have only used a couple of different entry points in order to take down a network. That would have been enough then, although there was a workaround. Then if you've got enough entry points to your network, you'll still have plenty to go around to allow your service to operate. Now, because some of these botnets are incorporating so many different devices from so many different points in the world, and with organizations with so many different internet-facing ports, attackers can direct more traffic towards more entry points to cause more damage. One thing that might be a slight silver lining here is that attacks are generally getting shorter, according to this survey, because ultimately running these campaigns costs attackers money. So the shorter they can make the campaigns, the more money they're going to make from them, or the less money they're going to spend doing these attacks. But it's still a very bad thing, because even if you take something like, let's say, a cloud-based office suite offline for a couple of hours, if that's a major provider, that's going to have impacts around the world on enterprise productivity. And just think of the billions of dollars which could be lost just because people can't access this. And we've seen it to some extent when, well, it's not a DDoS attack, but when things like your email service goes down, how unproductive the enterprise environment can be. But when it comes to DDoS attacks, there's someone going out there to cause this for a reason which might just be because they want to and they can. In some instances, DDoS attacks have some sort of political motivation. They're one of the first well-known examples of this happening was back in about 2008, where lots of digital services in the country of Estonia were taken offline for a long periods of time in an attack which many point towards being conducted by cyber attackers working for the Russian state, because it was in their interests at the time to try and weaken Estonia in order to meet their own ends. And it's kind of a blunt instrument in terms of a cyber attack, but it's effective at the end of the day, because companies and organizations, governments, individuals, because the way the world is getting more and more connected, we're more and more vulnerable if services are taken offline like this.
And I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to be on the other end of one of those attacks. Well, what, if anything, can we do, Danny?
That's the million-dollar question, because ultimately if you're a bigger organization, there are things you can do. You can employ firewalls, you can employ a company to help manage the traffic coming into your site, because these attacks happen because attackers can direct millions of devices, or tens of millions even maybe, to project internet traffic at your website at the same time. Even if you've got the most advanced solutions to stopping this, it's still going to have an effect by slowing you down. Something that can help in terms of preventing these, in terms of attackers being able to take control of devices, is making sure that devices aren't using default usernames and passwords. This is particularly true of Internet of Things products, which you might think, well, that can't create much traffic because it's a device of limited capabilities. But if you add a few million of these to a botnet, that's suddenly a lot of traffic. And the problem here is a lot of Internet of Things devices are equipped with either no password or a default password, which means it's easy for the attackers to guess and take control of these devices. So on a simple level, one thing that can be done to try to stop these attacks from being so powerful is to just make sure that default passwords aren't applied to your accounts. Because if it's easy for attackers to guess a username and password, they can take control of the device and use that internet traffic for whatever they want. And especially, as I said, especially this year, because with everything digital, you do not want your services going offline right now.
All right, Danny, appreciate you being with me here today. Much more on DDoS attacks, which you need to know, and the survey with all the information and Danny's article can be found on ZDNet. We hope you check it out.